Hello friends. So in today's lesson we'll be learning about DOM, what is DOM or the document object model, and how to manipulate it using JavaScript. So friends, we write HTML code, something like this, okay? And whenever browser loads our HTML, it creates a tree-like structure, okay? It creates an object-oriented tree-like representation of the web page. Okay, and that tree-like representation or an object-oriented tree-like representation of our entire HTML content is called DOM or document object model. Okay. Now, why is DOM important? Because DOM helps us traverse hmm, easily through the document and manipulate, change them at the runtime. Okay, we can update it, we can style it, we can do anything at runtime. Okay, so basically, what is DOM? DOM is an object oriented tree like representation of the entire web page. Okay, and in this lesson, we'll learn everything 100% of things about manipulating our DOM. So, first, how to access DOM. For that, we have a couple of methods like document.getElementById, by ID, get element by class name, get element by tag name, query selector, and query selector all. Okay, let's look at a few of them. So this is a simple HTML that I've built. It just has two divs, uh, and the divs have some, attributes and classes. So here we have the first div has a class called item1 and second one has a class called item2. So in our script, suppose we want to store, we want to select, access, and store our div1, item1 in a variable. So we can do something like this. Let item1 is equal to document dot get element by class name, and we can pass in the class name here. So our class name is item1. Okay, and now if I log item1, I can see that I have the object representation of item1 with me. Okay, I can do lots of things with it and we will do it shortly. So this is the one way of selecting, okay, accessing an element. Now let's say that we want to access element 2 but with ID, not with the class name. So it has an ID of item dash 1. Okay, so what we can do is let item 2 is equal to document dot get element by ID, and the class is ID is item 2. Okay, and now if I log item 2, I can see that I was successfully able to access item 2. Okay, now there is a tag name. So for example, they all have, both item 1 and 2 have div tag. Okay, and maybe I want to select all the items, those are divs. Okay, so what can I do is let items list 1 is equal to document dot get element by tag name, and I can select div here. And now if I log item list 1, you will see that I have an HTML collection. Okay, I have an HTML collection of, and in the collection I have both the items, item 1 and item 2. Also, I see a lot of other things selected here because they were essentially divs. So, but what basically we need here is item 1 and item 2. Next, document query selector. Okay, so if I do something like this, let item 1, maybe 1 is equal to document dot query selector, and in query selector we can just pass in the selector, the CSS selector. So what are we targeting? Maybe we are targeting something with a class of item 1. Okay, and we will see that we are getting, we of course need to log it. So this item 1 and we see that we were able to select item 1. Okay, what if I want to use an ID here? So I can use, so it's very similar, the API is very similar to the CSS selector. So for in CSS to select an ID we write hash, right? So we can do the same thing here, item 1. So it will select us everything, the first item that has item 1. So we see item 1 and the ID item 1. Also, if we pass in something like item, so there are two classes, there are two divs which has this class of item, right? So if I select document.query selector class item, so what will happen, friend? It will give us back the first item that it is able to find. Now, if in case we want to find out, we want to select all the CSS, all the divs which has class items. So we have let item list 2 is equal to document dot query selector all, and here if we pass in the class item and I log item list 2, we'll see that we'll get a node list, node list of both the items. So this is a very useful. So most of the times I find myself using document.query selector or document.query selector all. Okay? And this is a way to select either the first one that matches the selector or all of the node list uh, which matches the selector. Okay. Now how to traverse through them? So for example, we are getting back a node list using query selector. Now how can I address each one of them? How can I handle each one of them? So there are many way of iterating over them. We will look into all of them. So the first is that we can use the for each. So this node list has its own for each loop, which is very similar to arrays. Okay, remember friends, it's a node list, it's not an array. It's an iterable object, but it's a node list. And this for each looks like an arrays for each, but it's actually a special for each that JavaScript gives us for the node list. So what I can do here is I can iterate over item list 2 using the for each. It takes in a callback function and we get each element in the iterations. And now what I can do is I can log in anything. For example, maybe let's log out individual element here. So you can see that I'm getting each element one by one. Now, if I want to do something with each element, I can do that. I can perform checks like if it contains a particular ID or a class, and if I want to do something, I can do it inside the for each loop. Okay. And the node list, which is returned by query selector all, can be converted to a proper JavaScript array using array.from or the spread operator. So friends, at time you may want to convert this to an array, right? So what you can do is, let's create a variable item list to array. Okay. And we can use array.from to convert this iterable, which is item list 2, to an array. So if I log item list 2 array 1, it's a proper array. Okay, it's a proper array of multiple elements. Similar to this, we have another technique to convert it to an array, and which is using the spread operator. So what I'll do is let item list to array 2 is equal to, will spread out item list 2. So if you are aware of the iterables, we can spread out iterables, right? And we get back an array, and here if I log it, I can see that I again have a proper array. Okay, so what we did is we used for each to iterate or to loop over the node list, and second, using array.from or spread operator, we converted that iterable into a proper JavaScript array of elements. Okay, very useful, very useful. Then friends, we have for off loop. Okay, and for off loop, again, like all iterables, we can use for off loop and get either just the keys or values or entries. Okay? So this is something you can explore, and it's equally valuable. I find myself using um, the for each loop most of the times. Okay, I either find myself using the for each loop, or I find myself using array.from to convert that to a proper array of elements. Okay. Now, friends, how to grab or how to access children from parents or parent from children. So there are several ways, like we will look into a couple of them. So let's modify the structure a little bit so that we have a parent-child kind of a relationship here. So maybe I'll create another div with a class of item container. Okay, so I have an item container, and inside that let me place both of my divs. And now let me also format it so that it's in a nice single line. Okay, and yeah, so now I have something to play around with in a parent-child form. Now friends, let me first select the parent. Okay, so let parent is equal to document dot query selector, and I want to select item container, and I want to select the div with a class of item container. Okay, let me just make sure that I have selected it well. So if I check parent, I see that I have selected it. Now I want to access all the children of this parent element. Okay, so how do we do that? So friends, we have this method called child nodes. Okay, so what I can do is let children is equal to parent dot child nodes. Child nodes. Okay, and if I log children now, I see that I get all the children inside inside the parent. So that includes text, that includes div, that includes text, that includes div. Okay, so we get all the nodes inside our parent. Next, similarly, we can find the parent node from a children. So for example, if I select a parent, okay, or let me start from a children. So let child is equal to, suppose let's select item 1. Okay, let's select item 1 is equal to document dot query selector and then item 1. Okay, and then let parent is equal to child dot parent node. Okay, and now if I check the parent, I can see that it's the container. We were able to get the parent from a child. Honestly, friends, I don't find myself using these much. Hmm. I've in fact never used child nodes and parent nodes. Instead, for parent, I find myself using closest the most. Okay, so if you want to select the immediate parent, you can of course go with the parent node. But what you can do it, another thing that you can do is, and which I prefer to do most of the times, is let parent is equal to child dot closest. Okay, so the closest parent, and it can be anything. So I can select maybe uh, something that is item container. Okay, and now if I check parent, I have selected the item container. Okay, so it can be anything and any level up. So it can be any ancestor, and it will return back the closest ancestor that it finds. Okay, so this is for the parent. Now for siblings, we have this element dot next sibling, element dot previous sibling. So one thing that we can do for sibling is that we can select parent and then figure out rest of them. And another that sort of a shortcut that JavaScript provides us is that we can select element.next sibling to select the immediate next sibling and the previous sibling to select the previous sibling. Okay. Now we can create new DOM elements using from JavaScript, and we do that using document.createElement. Okay, so we can use document.createElement to create any HTML element that we need. We can create text nodes using create text node. Okay, so we have text nodes. So for example, when we return children, we also saw all the text, right, that we wrote in the HTML. So those are text nodes, and you can use in JavaScript we can use document.create text node to create text nodes, and then we can attach the newly created nodes, text nodes, to the elements and elements to the page. Okay, so creation and attachment, those are different things. Let's quickly look at it. Okay, so one thing that we can do is let new heading is equal to document dot create element, and I want to create an h1 element. Okay, inside h1 I want to have some text as well, so let new heading text is equal to document dot create text node, and this is my title. So we have created a nice text node. Now we want to attach this text node to the heading. Okay, so what we can do is new heading dot append, and we can append new heading text. but still we are not able to see this anywhere here, right? So we need to attach it to the body. So what we can do is we will look at how to attach. There are several ways of attaching it. One of the quickest way that we can see is on document dot body dot append the new heading. Okay, and now if I save it, I'll see that this title is now a part of my browser, my document, and we have dynamically created it using code. So we created a heading element, we created some heading text, we appended the text to the heading, and then we appended the heading to the document's body. Okay, so this is all done by JavaScript, and we can see it here. If we inspect it, you will see that you have your title here. Great. So now let's move ahead. And you will be having access to this note, so you can refer it anytime. Okay. Now, how to get or set text to elements. Okay. So there are a couple of ways, like we can use inner text to get the text or set the text. We can use the text content to get the text and set the text. And we can use inner HTML. Okay, so there are subtle differences between them. Let us look into them really quickly. First, we will see the subtle differences in the get operation, and then we'll be looking into the set operation. So what I'll do is, friends, I'll copy this line of HTML here to keep it super quick. And you will see that we have a paragraph of ID demo paragraph. And we can see that it has some extra spacings and a new line and a span, and also one another span in which we have put an inline style of display none. So I am hidden is inside surrounded by a span with a class of display none. Okay, friends. Now if I save it, you will see it like this. And of course, the one here is hidden, right? Because the display is none. Now, let's see how these behave differently. So if I log the inner text, if I log the inner text, I'll see something like this, which looks very similar to what we see here in the browser, right? And in fact, if you see that the hidden text, which was hidden using inline style, that's hidden here as well. So inner text basically gives us things exactly, almost exactly like the browser is displaying it. Okay, so this is inner text. Next is text content. So if I see text content, so you will see, friends, it has, all the extra spaces and the line breaks and, um, the text content basically, does not even hide something that was hidden using CSS. So it gives the text data in a very, very raw format, right? Just the way it was actually typed. So inner text gives you the way it is displayed. The text content gives you all the spaces and enters and everything. Okay, so this is something to be aware of. So in case you need all the spacings and everything, you use text content. If you need to get data the way it's displayed in the browser, along with hidden if the inline style is applied, so you use inner text. Okay, so these are subtle differences between them. And then we have inner HTML. Okay, inner HTML. So if I'm selecting the ID demo para, and I want its inner HTML along with all the extra spaces, and at the same time, I also want all the tags inside it. Okay. In that case, I use .inner HTML. So three ways to get or set the contents of an element. Okay? Inner text, text content, and inner HTML. Let me comment it out. Now setting operation. Okay. Similarly, there are some subtle differences when you are trying to set operation using uh, using one of them. So for example, friends, I'm creating a couple of elements here, hmm, a couple of divs, div2, div3. Okay. And I use dot inner text and give, this value to it where it has an enter. Okay. So now you'll see that if I give the inner text, use the inner text to set the inner text, you will see that the line breaks will convert into BR tag, and I'll get, this representation which is very similar to what we have written here. Okay. Similarly, if we use the text content, so we won't be getting this BR tag or something. It will be like almost, identical. It will be like plain text. And inner HTML, again similar. Okay. So these are again very, very subtle differences if we use inner text or we use the text content. And in inner HTML, we can use text and also HTML elements. Okay, so I can set inner HTML directly using any HTML element. Now, rendering HTML inside elements. So we have already seen it that we have this inner HTML which we can use to set an HTML inside another element. Okay, so the way to render HTML inside elements is using the inner HTML. Adding elements to DOM is really easy in JavaScript. Still, I see lots of people getting confused by it. So we will understand all the ways to add elements to the DOM. And in like 2 minutes, this concept will be very, very clear to all of you. Okay, so one thing we have already seen is that we have created this heading, right? Now we want to append it to body. So one way we have already seen that we can do something like parent. Okay, so parent is basically this container, okay, with this blue border. And we can do dot append, and we can append the new heading. What append does is inside the parent, the last item, as a last item, it has appended heading 1. If I inspect it, friends, I will see that H1 is the last item inside the parent, okay, the item container. So this is one way which we have already seen. Another way is append child, which is very, very, very similar to append, but append lets you append either string, or which is the inner text, or the the node. Okay. Also, append lets us add multiple things, whereas append child just lets us add one node. Okay, so I find myself using append all the time. The next is the insert before. So this is very useful. So what happens is, if I want to insert this title before item 2, what can I do? So I can use insert before, and I have to insert new heading before item 2. So as obvious, it is inserted just before item 2. What if I want to insert it before item 1? I can do that. It is now inserted before item 1. Really simple. So first is append, which you will find yourself using a lot. Then you have insert before. So inside a parent, so inside a parent, one of its children, before which children do you want to put it? So inside a parent, you can get some append will basically append it as a last child, but this insert before will give you a little bit more flexibility as to where to place the new item. Okay, so this is one thing. And the third and the final way is insert adjacent HTML. Again, I find myself using this a lot and it gives us a ton of flexibility. So for example, let's see the same parent and insert adjacent HTML, and I want to insert new heading. And where do I want to add it? I want to add it before begin, say. So I want to add it before begin. And also, friends, it requires a string, an HTML tag. So something like, a proper string HTML. So something like h1 and a closing h1 tag and something here, title. But of course, seems like it did not work. Maybe I made some simple typos. So insert adjacent HTML, insert adjacent HTML. And I can see that before the beginning of the parent, the title was inserted. But I would like to, we never want to hard code strings like this. We want to use a variable so that that can be reused again. So how can I use this new heading here? Because this is a node, okay? This is an object representation, but I need a string here. So this is very simple. I can just select the outer HTML here and it will work for us. So now the new heading is inserted before begin of the container. Second option is that we want to insert after the beginning. So what we can do is after the beginning, and we can see that after begin, and it's inserted after the beginning of the parent. And similarly, we have before end and after end. So friends, there is nothing to get confused, right? So we have three ways which we'll be using to insert elements or add elements to DOM. The first is append. Second is insert before. And the third is insert adjacent element, whichever is suitable or required. For our case, most of the times append should suffice. Okay, so this is the way to append HTML to a DOM. Okay, very useful. You will find yourself using it a lot. It's a simple concept, nothing very complicated. So in this example, we saw how to create and add HTML elements using JavaScript, right? But most of the times you will find yourself toggling classes, right? Instead of creating and adding elements, most of the times you will find yourself checking if a class exists, removing if it exists, toggling it, right? Toggling means if it exists, then remove it. If it's not there, add it. You'll find yourself doing these most of the times. So we have ways to do that, and every element has a class list, and we can use class list.remove to remove a particular class from the list. Then we can use class list.add to add another class to it, and we can pass in multiple values inside add and remove. We can toggle and we can check if it exists using contains. Again, it's very, very, very self-explanatory. I'll show you one or two of these. So for example, if I want to check if item1 dot class list dot contains hello, then we'll see that it gives us a false. But if we check if it contains something called item, it gives us a true. So if we want to check that if a class exists in an element, we can use class list.contains. Similarly, friends, let me write it here. Okay, so item1 dot class list dot add, for example, hello. And now if we inspect it, friends, if we inspect it, item1 now has a class of hello. What if I want to remove this item dash 1, or what if I want to remove hello? So I can use item1 dot class list dot remove hello. And what will this do? It will remove the hello again. Okay, so very easy. Class list dot add, class list dot remove. Now adding and removing attributes. So there can be multiple attributes, like there can be classes, there can be some data attributes like data ID, data new test, there can be title, there can be ID. So what we can do is, friends, we can use the get attribute method and the set attribute method to get or set the attributes. Again, it's very, very simple. Let's look at one example. So what I can do is, friends, for example, in this div, okay, what I can do is I can log, or why even log? I can do it directly in the browser. So we have an attribute called data ID, right? Or data new test. So what I can do is, or maybe let's take title, okay? What I can do is item1 dot get attribute title, and this will give us back the title. And what if we want to set the title? We can do item1 dot set attribute and title, and we want to set the title to our new title. Okay, and now if we see, if we hover over item1, we will see that it's a new title. The title has changed. Okay, so this is the way we set and get attributes. For anything that begins with data, okay, for anything that begins with data like data ID, data new test, we have it. We have a utility called data set. Okay, so what I can do is item1 dot dataset dot ID, and I get back 1. So here I have data dash ID, right? So dataset, if I'm using dataset, I can get rid of data and dash, and I can directly use ID to get the ID. Okay, so this is very handy, very easy to use. Also, here I have data new test. So what it does is it converts new test to camel case. So I can get rid of data dash and use new test in a camel case. So I can do something like item1 dot data set dot new test, and I get back test1. If I want to see a list of all the data sets, again, which is a very, very useful thing, many times you have to loop through all the data properties and do some processing. In that case, you can do number1 dot data set, item1 dot data set, and you get a nice DOM string map of all the data set. Okay, so again, a very useful property. In order to remove an element completely from your DOM, you can use dot remove, or inside parent you can do remove child and select one of its child. Okay, so this will completely remove it from the DOM. Styles can be modified, so you have almost all the CSS styles here. But yeah, again, instead of background dash color, it's camel cased, and you can apply any style to any HTML element like this. and I'll encourage you to experiment a little bit with it. So what I can do is I can maybe, item1 dot style dot background color is equal to maybe gold. Okay, and now we'll see that the background changes to gold. And similarly, item1 dot style dot color is equal to maybe dodger blue, and it's converted to blue. Okay, so we can apply CSS styles, and if we inspect it, we will see that we get an inline style of these styles. Again, friends, we don't do it like that because it's we are blurring the line between the styling and the functionality. We usually use JavaScript to toggle classes. That's what we do most of the time if we are using a CMS like a Drupal, especially. And um, we usually avoid adding inline styles like this. Okay, but yeah, we have this option. It's good to know that. Yeah. So in this not so short, around 40 minutes video, you have learned everything about DOM and manipulating your DOM. Okay, so yeah, that was a lot of knowledge. You will have access to these notes. I'll encourage you to please go through the note and go through the recordings and practice it yourself. Okay,